Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you may be joining us from. Jason, this is episode 81 of our LinkedIn live stream that we've been doing now for almost 2 years. Actually, I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, it's very much almost 2 years, and that's hard to imagine. But awesome stuff that we've got for you today. This is also the second episode of a four-part series where we're going to unpack our data protection trends report. Before we do that, though, want to encourage you wherever you might be joining us from around the world, feel free to put in a comment, a shout out where you're tuning in from. You can see our world map here now. You've got the four production team members up on screen. I'm in Colorado, Jason's in Texas, our producers in Georgia, and we've got production support extraordinaire from Romania happening live as well. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to enter those in chat. We'll be sure to address them. If we can't get to them online live, we'll do so shortly after we go off of air. So now what we want to jump into, though, is Jason, just a quick little sidebar, if you
Yeah.
will. We've got some pretty interesting things around customer accolades that have come in. I want to share three different things with you first before we get into the research. Independent Veeam Customer Reviews and Awards, Gartner, and one of the major tier one analyst firms worldwide, they have something they refer to as peer insights. That's where end users are able to review things and comment on them. We've been recognized in that format, but also want to be showing or cognizant of two other interesting kinds of things. First being something called Trust Radius. That's the TR that you see. And you can see there that in 2021, we were top rated and we had some distinctions around best feature set, best value for the price, and also in terms of technical community activity. And then last but not least, something Jason called G2. There's almost too many awards to mention here, Jason, aren't there?
There's a bunch of accolades on this one. I mean, but take a look at this. Best usability, best meets the requirements, most implementable. I'm actually the one that actually struck out to me actually was meets requirements, because we're going to talk about. Well, last week we talked about what's driving change, what does modern look like. We're going to keep looking into what are the requirements that define data protection in 2022. But these flags just keep saying it seems like we're on the right track, Dave.
Yeah, what I really like, certainly like all of them, but what caught my eye, Jason, on the G2 huge award list there is I like how Veeam is considered a leader in all of the market segments, meaning enterprise, mid-market, small business. We've always said that's one of the uniquely defining characteristics of Veeam. We take the exact same product, the exact same code. You can run it on a Lenovo laptop, or you can run it in a Fortune 100 data center. And
Right.
either way, the product's going to work for you. So let's transition now into this data protection report. And I know you're going to take us through a little bit about where this data came from, and then we'll dive into content.
Yeah. So, one of the coolest things about this particular project is the year-over-year stuff. And about 3 years ago, Veeam went out to this little bitty research company, and I say that with all the sarcasm I can. Vanson Bourne does some of the largest independent research projects that I'm aware of in any industry. And so when we chose to partner with them, all of a sudden, just the data just became really, really solid, really, really reliable overall. This is our third year with Vanson running the actual research panel for us. And collectively, what you're looking at here, Dave, I love this slide. I mean, because there's 8,000 enterprises represented in this one slide. Let me walk us through what it is, and then let's talk about what the data means. So, if you look at the lime green, that left of each of the three bands, excuse me, in the DPR 2020 report, we asked organizations what percentage of your servers were physical on the left, virtual in the middle, or cloud hosted, meaning either a hyperscale cloud or an MSP on the right-hand side. And it was 38 to 30 to 32, pretty even balance in 2020. By the way, the 2020 data was pre-COVID, right? So it was actually surveyed through like December of 19. So just the months leading up to it. And we asked, oh, by the way, not only what are you doing in 20, but what are you going to do 2 years out? Next year, Another project, another 3,000 respondents. We get 29% versus 23 versus 47. So this is where we see, Dave, that inflection of pre-COVID versus post-COVID, a lot of shift towards that right-hand side. And we asked not only what are you doing in 20, what's it going to be in 23? That's the gray boxes. And then this year, we had our third year, another 3,400 enterprises to the mix. And you get the 2022 and what it's going to look like in 2024. So over these 3 years, Vanson Bourne put together 8,000 different enterprises around the world in 3 different independent research projects. And yet the lines and the shape of the data is so spot on. It just makes you feel really good, like this really is representative of a truly global 28 country set of samplings. And it tells some great stories, Dave.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, just looking directionally, the shape of each of those 3 curves. And while the story or takeaway may not be surprising, to your point, it's just the validation, the confidence that comes with now 3 years of surveying, now over 8,000 data points, probably not a surprise on that left-hand side to see that the physical in the data center going down. But notice how it's stabilized. We always like to make the point, Jason, that neither the data center nor all physical implementations go to zero or go away for the majority of us.
That's right. You know, most organizations today are taking a cloud-first approach. So as they're standing up new services, it would make sense that if that new server or service would run in a cloud, why not? But most organizations are not decommissioning the physical stuff. They're upgrading it. They might be doing some consolidation along the way. But for the most part, they're mostly waiting for those physical platforms to age out and just roll off the back of the truck. And so I do think that you're seeing this nice gradual plateau where we should expect, you know, if these trend lines hold true, that most data centers moving forward should be about 50-50 on-prem to cloud hosted. And of the material that's on-prem, it's going to be relatively evenly balanced between physical platforms and virtualized workloads on-prem. And then the mix actually varies a little bit more dramatically between the MSP versus the hyperscale hosts. But, you know, it's about this year that we're going to cross that 50% mark and be more cloud hosted than on-prem. Dave, this really does affect what modern data protection should look like, because in this kind of mix, it's not like you can just say, well, I'll back up most of my stuff with one solution and just do something small on the side. Right. It has to be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like, especially in these last couple of years with the global pandemic, it's been an and. You know, we've flexed into the cloud heavily, maybe even faster than some of us were anticipating. But we also have to have the on-prem data center remain up and active as well. So we've got our legs in both camps. That looks to be the case for some time. But to your point, we reached a tipping point, meaning greater than 50% into the cloud here in the very near future. And directionally, it's hard now looking at recent history not to have confidence that those percentages are actually going to pan out. I'm being told we've got a map update. Want to go and hit that really quickly to see where folks might be tuning in from. Again, I want to encourage you, invite you, if you have comments or questions, or just a shout out where you might be viewing, please put something in the chat function. In the U.S., we've got Missouri and New Mexico joining us. And then if we look globally, oh, wait, I think we've got a couple more as well. Is that Indiana, I believe? And
that's right.
Yep, good, Missouri. And then let's look over in Europe, Spain, as well as Turkey, Romania, Czech Republic, who we usually have a strong presence in. And we also see Nigeria. It's in the house. And there's one other. Tunisia as well. Wow, shout out there. Jason, Tunisia might be a newer entry for us. I don't recall him in the past.
That's awesome. Welcome, Tunisians. Is that right? Or I don't know what you call it, Tunisia native, but we're glad to have you here.
Very. Indeed. So switching or staying on this topic, let's just round out some of our discussion point, you know, as it relates to this sort of hybrid multi-cloud on-prem, but off-prem notion as well.
Well, I just, it seems like we should probably go ahead and give a plug for the Veeam technologies that kind of fit in this space, right? So last week, one of the most important, usually it's the one or number two, depending on what country or vertical that you're looking at. But one of the main drivers of what respondents in this survey said, what does modern look like? It's consistency of protection between on-prem and the IaaS and SaaS platforms that are out there. And when you look at so cleanly what the direction is, where almost every organization is going to be hybrid, this just totally makes sense, right? So if you're going to have your workloads evenly distributed, that's why you have a consistent solution between on-prem and cloud-hosted platforms.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. So I've been remiss, Jason, not to mention, the little box in the corner there that this is a sneak peek. Our full report publishes globally on February 22nd, which is coming up in short order. And in fact, we have an internal clock just for this. We've got now coming up, it's actually going to be, and I'll get the exact dates for this. It is 7 days, 16 hours, 4 minutes, and 22 seconds from that point where we're going to publish live. We'll also have some shorter briefs available globally, but the full report is going to publish here in really short order, just a couple of weeks away. But here's a couple sneak peeks for you. Let's transition, Jason, into our second sneak peek item, because this one's very interesting as well.
Yeah, so one of the new data points we wanted to ask for this year is, what does enterprise really mean? And for as long as you and I have been in this space, it used to be that words like enterprise was synonymous with things like scale, meaning just literally that, hey, it should work about the same way as it does in every other market. Oh, by the way, it just has to deal with a broader number of workloads. And so we thought this year it'd be fun to go and ask, 3,400 of our closest friends, what does enterprise backup mean to you? And the question actually is, what does enterprise backup mean? And then if your organization was considering a new enterprise backup solution today, which would be the most important aspects of that? Now, Dave, what you're looking at here is is sorted by most common. So they can choose all that applied, and that's those bright green lines. And it's interesting that the top three options are all related to different workloads. So the most common response is not scale, right? In fact, the most common response is truly heterogeneity. In fact, when you read the report, in 7 days, 16 hours, 14 minutes, whatever that number was that you quoted, that that first title page actually says enterprise basically is a synonym for heterogeneity, the breadth of workloads. But Dave, you challenged when we were first looking at this data to look at it a little differently, to look at it based on what's most important and how does that change the priority set. There's a couple meta themes that come out of this as well. Shall we kind of break those down?
Yeah, I think it's interesting here. Yeah. So again, we've now reoriented this a little bit. Let's rank it by choose one, the most important criteria. What you start to see is SaaS and infrastructure as a service supporting that prior slide, meaning that movement to cloud, that embracing of cloud capabilities starts to percolate up to the top. And it's not by a little. Some of our results, we get sort of three-way ties for number one, three-way ties for number two. Here, when you can only choose one item, it's very, very clear we have separation that, quote, modern cloud-hosted workloads jumps up. But speaking of workloads, we still see enterprise applications like Oracle, SAP HANA, going back to it's going to maintain a hybrid notion for most of us going forward, a feed in both camps, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make an assumption out of how this data looks. I mean, if you look at it, like options 2 through 9, the spreads are like 1 point off on each one as they kind of rolls back down. But the fact that modern IaaS and SaaS, if you roll the clock back, Dave, 15 years, you would probably have, if we asked the same question, what they would have said was, hey, I've got this legacy backup solution, and it's protecting all of my legacy platforms, all of my Unix, some of my mid-range, my NetWare servers, right, my Windows boxes. And what I really need, what does modern look like? It looks like virtualization backup, because my legacy backup solution just ain't doing it. right? And so I think it's really interesting that I think what this slide is telling you is that the reason that top one is so high is because most legacy backup solutions don't do IaaS well, don't do SaaS well. And so if they were going to look for a new enterprise class backup solution today, the thing that most enterprises really need is the same class of capabilities for IaaS and SaaS as they get for the rest of the environment. That's what these top two and that beautiful delta in between the first and second options goes through. Let's look at the second trend. Second trend out, this is around ease of management across multiple locations. And I love the fact that we still get assuredly reliable, right? Mm-hmm. It is interesting to me when people say, what does enterprise mean and reliability? Reliability necessarily is not that same synonym. It's not like, the Swiss watch or the German train. Reliability is important, but that's not what the term enterprise leans into. But it's really, I thought it was interesting here that this is about distribution. It isn't necessarily about scale. Dave, did that surprise you?
Yeah, it really did. And I think, you opened with it nicely that historically we used to think of enterprise meaning how many units of whatever could you protect? How many petabytes of data? How many VMs? How many servers? How many applications, etc. But now what we really see is, okay, I need to support a variety of workloads, a variety of deployment models, meaning on-prem, cloud, hybrid, as well as now needing to do that from a broad geographic perspective, not in probably no small part emphasized by work from home, remote workforce taking place. And then the fact that assuredly reliable came so high in the list, we always marvel at that whenever we see need to make sure we can maintain our backup SLAs, need to make sure we can complete the backup window, make sure in this case that it's reliable. It's obvious why this would be a criteria, but it's somewhat reflective of a concern in the environment, especially now in this context, enterprise, that reliability is not a given.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, we're asking a different question, right? Yeah. It'd be like asking, why did you choose why did you want to, last week you used the example, why would you go and get a new car as opposed to the car that you have? And your response was, because my current car isn't getting me where it's going, right? It's not reliable. This is a different question. This is a question on why did you choose a minivan versus a truck versus a sports car? You're looking at an aspect of it. Not necessarily, I mean, you still need a reliable car, right? That's still one of the primary drivers is to improve RTO, RPO, to improve reliability. That's still the reason you're looking for something new. But this question is asking, what does enterprise mean to you? And that's a different question. Yes. And in this question, I think folks are just taking reliability as something that, frankly, they ought to be getting, whether they're an enterprise, whether they're a mid-market, whether they're a small business. You buy something, you want it to work, dang it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, all right, third up, now let's do some myth busting. So we've been contrasting about scale here. So let's kind of draw that out a little bit. I do think it's interesting that that scale is, when you think about synonyms for enterprise, only about 38%, 1 in 3, say that scale is a defining aspect of enterprise, and only 7%, single digits, 1 in 14 orgs say, oh, this is the most important. And for that 1 in 14 orgs, it's the most important thing that's out there. And as you mentioned, the same stuff that you and I protect our laptops with, Fortune 500 companies protect with Veeam as well. So that's great. Just understand that enterprise does not mean scale. Dave, what were your thoughts looking at how the traditional platforms, how low that sits? Is that, again, kind of endemic of just the heterogeneity that folks are looking for?
Yeah, I think you could look at this from two dimensions. On the one hand, it's reflective of heterogeneity. On the other hand, it's reflective of if I could have easily moved off of that system, let's say it's AIX or Solaris, I would have already done so. There's a reason I still have that platform. It's mission critical. It's running something that I'm not able to source or re-platform easily somewhere else. And it's a reflection that unstructured data continues, whether it be file shares or network attached storage, continues to be something that data centers are trying to get their arms around. The scale, though, I have to admit, a little bit surprised on that. Maybe it's just historical colorization and bias, but interesting that one tool to manage 1 million things is not nearly as interesting as support my current environments and where I expect them going.
Amen. Amen. I'm also just going to give a plug out to, one of the things that, Veeam was admittedly, what's the nice way to say this? Nowhere near first to market when it comes to a NAS-based offering, right? So, I mean, and it was our V10 product that really kind of came out with that. So while organizations are saying in the second part of the question, if you were buying a new enterprise backup, what's most important? I'm okay with NAS being fairly low in the list and that, that's not what's driving new. But if you haven't looked at, it took us a while to put that out. We were so focused on protecting hyper virtualized environments across every hypervisor known to man. But if you haven't seen what we've done before us, NAS backup been pretty much the same way for the last 15 years. And what we're doing now actually really is a much more modern and scalable approach to that. Take a look at that while you're there. Dave, shall we look at the last piece of data that kind of comes into the fray?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, be clear, while we supported NDMP for NAS workloads in the past, what we did a couple of years back in version 10 was a unique change file tracking mechanism independent of any NAS underneath it, meaning we could bring that capability to a Dell EMC Isilon or a QNAP or Synology.
Yep. And actually, Dave, let's do this. Let me get up one more slide going. But before we do, can we go back to the map?
Yeah, let's hit that. Awesome. So in the United States, we see New York has come in. We also, looking globally in Europe, we've got Belgium and UK. And if we look down in other geos, we've got Dubai, South Africa, and Sudan that's come in. So awesome for that. Sudan might be one of the newer ones, or at least I don't remember in the past having them in. So welcome, of course, welcome all. But it's always amazing for us to see how many different locations tune in. And Jason, this is reflective of why we do a large global survey and go out to almost 36 countries.
Yeah, we talked about this a little earlier in the month. You don't need 3,400 responses to get good data. You don't, right? Most industry analyst firms, they'll do 200, 300. The really big projects, 450, right? The reason we do 3,400 surveys is because we want to know what's different between countries like South Africa and Dubai versus UK and Belgium, the ones that you mentioned just a few seconds ago. We want to know what's different between healthcare and financial services and public sector. And so the fun part about having this massive and serving all these countries in all these different roles is so we can really understand what do we as Veeam need to do to really delight customers no matter what your situation is and no matter where you are on your IT modernization curve.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm seeing that Ohio and Nevada in the United States just came in as well. So awesome. Welcome. Thank you. And Tennessee. Okay. We're rolling now, Jason.
Some of my favorite whiskey comes out of that state. So, all right. I think we have time, Dave, for one last data point for today. Is that okay?
Sure.
So this one is one of my favorites. This is what we call the reality gap. And actually, it was not our question to begin with. It was actually our founder, Ratmir Timashev, who actually first asked, is there a difference in expectations between what the business expects from IT and what IT can actually deliver? When you're looking on the top half of this is what we call the availability gap. The availability gap is when you go to the business leaders and say, if something were to break, how long before it can get back up and running again? And then you go to the IT folks and you say, how long does it really take to get it back up and running again? And Dave, this is the worst gap year that we've had in the history of this report. 47% strongly agree that they have an availability gap. 43% agree So collectively, 90%, 9 out of 10 orgs think there's a gap. And then right behind that, 89% think there's a protection gap, meaning that they're going to lose more data than what the business can actually tolerate. Dave, these are pretty scary numbers, but from a perception perspective, this has to drive change, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think this is exactly why we see reliability show up high on the list, or why we see to attain service level agreements as a primary driver for why you would switch backup solutions. If you self-assess, as you stated here, that we've got this gap in what we can recover and how much we're going to lose, that is a concerning business plan, because it basically means if something bad happens, and we know, unfortunately, not just cyber, but traditional data center causes of outages, be it networking, application updates, storage failures, on, misconfigurations, user error, administrator error. Lots of bad things, unfortunately, can unexpectedly take down a server. And what this is saying is you're going to lose more data than you think you can and wait longer to get back up into productivity than you think you should. So you already know that your recovery plan is going to miss.
Yeah, and when you combine this top line perception from executives on I'm going to lose more data than I can afford to lose, IT can't bring the systems back up as fast as I need them to. All of a sudden, it becomes really understandable why, in the earlier data we shared last week, that the number one things they're looking for is improving RPO, RTO, the looking for improving reliability. Then we saw today that the shift of physical virtual cloud, and again, I think that comes into this as well, because for too many organizations, they modernized production faster than they modernized protection. And so now what you're seeing here is that gap. And I think this all just kind of culminates into, we got to get back to the basics this year. We got to get back to just making sure, is our stuff protected and recoverable based on our expectations? And this data says that we're not there yet. This is going to be a year of fixing.
Yeah, and let's maybe take a glass half full side of this, because that's how you ended your comment, which I like a lot. Understanding the challenges, that's important, but it's important because then it illuminates, what do we go do? How do we shore up this gap? And even if you're not in a position to address absolutely everything immediately, I always like to say two things. One, you can't do everything, but you can do something. So that's just right. Incrementally try to improve your situation. Two, see if this data is in any way lines with what you're experiencing in your organization, and potentially you can use this as air cover with senior management. So with that, as we begin to wrap up, want to point ahead. This coming Friday, our usual colleague, Rick Vanover, he is actually going on site in Las Vegas in anticipation of the upcoming VeeamON event that we do, returning in person. It'll be hybrid, and we'll talk more about that as we get going. That's my backdrop here.
Very nice. Very nice.
May 16th through 19th, if you could read that. But we're going to have a drill down on our licensing model called Veeam Universal Licensing, as we introduced now almost 3 years ago. Corinne Bissett from our global technology team and Chris Spencer from our product marketing team are going to have a chat about why that's beneficial for you. And then 1 week from today, I'm going to step aside. We're going to bring in our three musketeer, if you will, our third of our research trio, Julie Webb. Julie and Jason are going to be decomposing a few more highlights just before this data protection survey goes live globally.
Yeah, so Julie gets the advantage of it'll be less than 24 hours before the report hits. So we're going to, I don't know exactly what she's going to cover with me yet, but it'll be right on that bleeding edge of when the report comes live. So you won't want to mix next Monday.
Yeah, and want to give a shout out. Honduras has come in, and we don't think we've seen Honduras before. So welcome. Thank you for joining. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Bye for now.